30 years ago, we never would have imagined being here talking about this. We went from childhood games to energetic alignment. By doing the work, we created better versions of ourselves. Join us, two women sharing their intimate journal entries on their path to consciousness. Get in here, get in here, get in here. If you like our content and you want to hear more, subscribe, like, and comment below.
Authenticity. The Black culture has coined this phrase a few years back of being unapologetically Black, aka authentic. Showing up to meetings and in circles as myself has given me a prideful sense of knowing myself. Sure, I show up everywhere Black, but my Blackness isn't the only thing that defines me. What are the things that I like most about myself? What excites me? What gets me going? That's when I'm really tapped in. When you find out those things, you raise your personal value and finally identify your worth.
People may say I've always walked to the beat of my own drum, but that wasn't entirely true. I still cared what they thought. I lived my life seeking others' approval and validation. But when I healed and finally walked in my truth, those drums vibrated throughout my entire universe, giving others the freedom to do the same. I finally understood why authenticity is so important to growth and evolution. If you can't be real with yourself, do you know who you truly are? When you can be who you are authentically, the miracles are daily, the manifestations come quickly, and life, well, it just got a whole lot more fun. Get in here, get in here, get in here, y'all, and welcome back to episode 8 of season 2. And I can't believe we're already here talking about all things authenticity. So I'm going to start
Yes.
you off, Keela. Tell me what you were excited about with this episode.
Just talking about being who I am, being us, being authentic. That is really truly the end game when you think about it, right? To know yourself
Mhm.
makes you a little bit more open to everything around you. Um, it gives others the opportunity to support you in your authenticity. And, when I talked about in my journal the phrase unapologetically Black, I remember hearing that for the first time. And I was like, ooh, that's so good. And I love the fact that we did it at a time where we needed to come together because I feel like it was probably around
I think
the
it was George
time
Floyd,
George, yeah,
right?
I was going to say
Mhm,
that. Yeah, George Floyd
mhm.
died, and we were just sick of being tired, right? Sick and tired of being tired. Or
Sick
what's
and
that
tired of
phrase?
being sick and tired. Yeah.
That's the one. We were just sick of it. So we were just like, you know what? Now what you see is what you get. And
Mhm.
so I don't think we understood that that is a level of healing because when
Yeah.
you can show up to a place as yourself and get people to buy in to this new you, because at the end of the day we all try to evolve and we all try to level up in a sense, and we get wiser and we get older and we just have these new experiences, and you have to take all of that with you and start to kind of carve out this new you. And if you love that new you and you can kind of bring it out even more each day, I think that's just the joy of living to me.
Mhm. Yeah, no, I agree with you, and the part that really resonated with me where you're talking about, like, being authentically you, I think
Yeah.
both of us working in corporate, we
Mhm.
have had to fight that, like, fine line of what is me being authentically me and what's
Yes.
gonna make sure that I keep this job.
Exactly.
So, like code switching, right? How do we
Correct.
make sure that like I still show up and keep this job, but I still can be myself? And I think,
Mhm.
especially as Black women, we have a hard time. It is such a fine line between being perceived as too much, too ghetto,
Bossy.
too loud, too confrontational, like, like
Right.
angry Black woman, like we're always just one step away. And so
Yeah.
because of that, Black women had to dial back. So we went
Yes.
back 5, 6, 7 steps to make sure that you didn't perceive anything that we said as possibly being aggressive
Mhm.
or anything like that. And so we kind of all learned how to code switch in order to protect our livelihood.
Yes.
And I feel like, again, after George Floyd, a lot of that started to change where women were like, and finally, even now, when we see what is happening in our world, especially in the States with politics, that Black women have been like, I'm gonna sit this one out and I'm just gonna be
Correct.
me. You know what I'm
Correct.
saying? And so, and that's what we're also seeing. And so, this approval and us finally being able to step up and be ourselves authentically.
Yes, I absolutely agree. But I do have to give a shout out to my white coworkers who also stepped up as allies too, right? Because I think
Mhm.
we all went through something in that moment of George Floyd. Like you saw white people out at those protests, and so they understood that we were sick and tired. They really did. And they, stood beside us and they really allowed us to open up and come to work authentically, right? Um, you had a lot of programs. The DEI program was kind of like jump started, and you was like, oh. And then you have, the CEO coming on these town halls, and they're like, we want everyone to show up to work and put their best foot forward and not have to feel a certain way. So you had a lot of support coming from coworkers, and you was like, oh, okay, now it's my time. Now it's my time
Mhm.
to be myself. But in that moment, a lot of us really didn't know ourselves, right? So we didn't know if coming up to work with the neck rolling and the
And the
popping,
eyes.
that
Mhm.
we at some degree we still knew that that wasn't it, right? But that's also not ourselves either. Like we don't really talk like that in real life. Like I know I don't. I'm not around my dinner table doing all of this and
I do it to
making
be funny, like, when I'm talking to you or to be like,
right
"Girl, to bring home a point," but you're
as
right,
a
that is not my
joke.
everyday
Yeah,
speaking voice. Um,
exactly.
you brought up a good point because I believe 2020 was the breaking point for society. I think
Yes.
between everything between COVID, between George Floyd, and everything that happened thereafter, it was almost like I say a splitting of 2 worlds, and you had to decide
Mm,
which world you were gonna get on because I also feel that's when I started doing the real work, and I
yeah.
felt like there was a call universally that, like, was like, I have the time because the world shut down, it was an easy way to be like, "Oh, okay, I actually have the time now to focus on me."
We
And you
did.
notice people either did one or the other. They either focused on themselves and started to heal, or they distracted themselves so that they did
Yes.
not have to. And I know that can be really difficult because being quiet and being alone and not being able to go out and entertain yourself, if you had those demons and those skeletons in your closet that you weren't ready to deal with, you looked
Mhm.
for another distraction to put them in. And so, like I always say, like 2020 was a very pivotal year for society as a whole to decide how you want to move forward in this world. And so,
Mhm.
like you said, there was the D&I initiatives, and now here we see D&I issues being
The
rolled back.
roll
But then you
back.
have those corporations that are stepping up that are like, actually, no, we're
Yeah.
going to continue to do this. And
Right.
so, when we think about being authentic, what I have found overwhelmingly is the more authentic I am, the more I find like-minded individuals come
Mhm.
into my world, right? And that's
Yes.
essentially what you want. And when I was free from my own demons and skeletons in my closet and no longer felt that shame or all of those things, it gave me the freedom to really show up authentically as myself. And when I did that, you and I reconnected.
Mhm.
Certain coworkers and I who had never really talked to, all of a sudden we now have this different connection, or
Yeah.
new friends or old friends, you know what I'm saying? And so when you are vibrating at a place that is authentic, you are naturally pulling in more of those other people who are also being authentic.
Yeah. And you're also inspiring those around you
Mhm.
to, be different or be themselves. I know for me, I have the conversations that I'm having like with my friends now, they're changing. And I'm seeing the change in to me, it's like, oh my God, I just talked about this in the podcast with, Zakia a couple of weeks ago. Maybe they haven't even heard about it, but, they're already tapped into this new me, and it's allowing them to have those conversations with me and be tapped in as well. So I love the fact that, my friends are beginning to either do the work, start to heal themselves, talking differently. I had two friends of mine text me the other morning just to tell me their dreams. And I
Mm.
thought that was so sweet. I was like, okay, well, I don't know. I'm not the dream
The dream
interpreter.
analyst. Yeah.
I'm not the dream interpreter. But I just thought that was just
No.
amazing. And those are the conversations that I want to have and continue having with my friends, because they see a difference in me. I see a difference in them. And, we can continue on in this journey together.
After we wrapped season one, your sister sent me this beautiful text about you, about just how much she had seen
Oh,
the change in you. And I was like, oh, that's so beautiful. And I just, again, like you're saying, because you started to be authentic
yeah.
and change the way that you respond to situations, other people have now seen it and can either respond the same way, or know that they have to respond to you differently. And I think that's
Yes.
what's so beautiful about you being authentic. And like when you heal and you show up as yourself, you give others the approval and the validation to do the same.
Right.
And it's funny because I remember shortly after college, a guy like sent me a from school sent me a DM and was like, I've always just admired how you always just kind of like walk to the beat of
Oh.
your own drum. And in college, I mean, I had bright red hair. I had like
Mm,
short hair, and like if you remember back in high school, I cut my hair off natural
you
in
did.
like 11th grade, which is like y'all pre-natural. There was no natural like movement, right? Everybody had a perm. I was the only one with this
Right.
very short hair, and I just remember doing it because I didn't want to spend any Saturdays in the salon. I was like, I'm over
You
that.
were over it.
Unique Designs by Carol. You remember that girl? We used to get our hair done
Yes.
with her. Yeah.
We went to the
So
same lady.
I was done. I was like, I'm not doing this anymore, spending hours in here. So I cut my hair off. I was also like a lifeguard. So swimming every day for summer camp
Oh, yeah.
did not work. But I remember thinking that like, yes, I was kind of myself, but I was not authentically who I am now back then.
Right, but that's my point. Like, we continue to evolve. Like, I
Mhm.
remember meeting you back in the 6th grade, and I was like, "Oh, she's a black hippie." I was like, "Look at her."
Well, you were coming from New York. So to come from New York to North Carolina,
It's
I
like,
did seem very
"Who
hippie-ish, yeah.
is this?" But you intrigued me, and the fact that you did walk to the beat of your own drum, like, at that early stage, I'm sure you had to change, but at that early stage, you got it. Like, you didn't need validation. I thought that was just so great because, well, because I am coming in new, I'm like, oh, I need everybody to like me. So it was different for me, but you were just like, okay, I am who I am. And I love that.
Well, okay, so that's middle school, right? Where I probably was more authentically who I was and wasn't afraid to be because no one had told me that I wasn't good enough until
That
I met I had
damn high school.
a high school boyfriend, y'all, who fucked my brain chemistry up. Like,
Oh my
literally,
God.
because I found
Sakia.
out that he was cheating with, like, multiple girls in the school, out of the school, around the school. He was slanging dick throughout the city, basically, right?
And I
Yeah.
remember being like, Zakia, why him?
Girl, y'all, he messed me up because it
He
was the
did.
first time
Yeah.
that it made me, and no, I'm not gonna say it was the first time, but the first time really was when I was 4, my mother left, me not realizing that that was a wound that has been open
Yeah.
because it felt like my mom didn't choose me, but in that's the first time I remember as a young adult or, a teenager being like, I'm not good enough for this
Hmm.
person.
Right.
And that messed me up and changed my decision making, especially with the men that I chose, which is why I said when I read that letter, it was a letter from him in high school that I read a few years
Mm.
ago. And I was like, oh my God, I have
Oh.
been dating the same man since high school. And clearly none of those have worked. So, but it was because I was making those decisions
Yeah.
from that wound that had been placed there that told me I wasn't good enough, or there was someone that was better than you. And
Mhm.
so it made me kind of go into a shell. It kind of
Yeah.
took away that authentic voice of mine that I had, or walking to the beat of my own drum. And now that I have it back because I did the work, I cleared out those skeletons in my closet. I kind of always laughed and kind of felt like, I mean, I've always kind of wanted to, like, I remember being younger, being wanting to be famous, but then being like, you got skeletons in your closet. Like,
They not gonna let me live. They
I
gonna
was like,
come out and try
they
to
gonna be selling
tell.
my story to TMZ. I ain't gonna work. And so season one was really me being like, I'm gonna go ahead and put my
Put it
junk out
out
there,
there.
and then you can't. And
That's
but that
it.
also gave me permission to be okay with every trial that I have gone through, every challenge, everything that was difficult, me embracing it and then telling my story to give other people the freedom to heal from them really has allowed me to step more authentically into myself, because
Yeah.
I'm sharing a story that I know that I am meant to. And like, I know that my voice chakra is meant to vibrate throughout this world so that other people can hear it and so that other people can heal, so that we can all evolve. Listen, like,
Yeah.
look, everybody is not here to evolve, right? And that's a truth
That's
that
it.
you have to know. You also have to know that you cannot change or force anybody to do anything else. All
Right.
you can do is change yourself. And if you want to live authentically and you do that, your environment around you will start to also be authentic. So some people may fall away, but new people will come in.
Yeah.
So it's just really
Breaking
important you be yourself.
I think breaking the need to be validated
Hmm.
was the biggest, like, aha moment for me. And so that's how you start to learn about yourself and start to say, oh, this makes me happy or this makes me exciting. Like those questions that I was asking about myself early on. Like, but I had to get rid of this need to be validated by everybody first. That was the first step for me. And then it was like, okay, now tap in. Like, you don't care or think or, worry what anyone else has to say about you. That is not your concern anymore. Your concern is you. And it's not selfish, people. Like, learning yourself, getting to know yourself, it is not selfish at all. It is the best thing that you can ever do for yourself. And
Now, do you go ahead?
I was going to say, I also think that this evolution of us, it came also with us becoming mothers, right? Like,
Mm.
you know what I mean? Like, I felt like I had to be authentic because I wanted my kids to see me. Like, I didn't want them to see this Stepford wife and I have to be this for the family and I had to look this certain way. Because I wanted to raise my children to be themselves. So I had to start with me. So, mothering, I think, is also one of those examples or segues into you kind of finding out who you really are.
Well, that's why I had to get a divorce, because
Mm,
my children needed to see who I was
that's
authentically out of a
true.
marriage.
You're
Because
right about that.
honestly, they never,
Yeah.
I knew how to show up and be mommy dearest for them.
Right.
I knew how to do everything, but like, there was one day that I knew that the day that I knew I had to get out of my marriage was I was sitting on the couch and I had things to do and I could not pull myself off of the couch. Like, no matter what I tried to do, I could not get up.
Mm.
And it was then that I was like, is this what depression is?
Oh.
And it's funny because as much as I tried to hide that from my children, it wasn't until I was divorced in my own place. And I remember the girls, we were in the car and we were talking about something. And I can't remember what the conversation was, but I will never forget what my daughter said. She goes, my daughter was like, "Oh, I don't remember that." And so my other one was like, "Well, that's when mommy was sad a lot." And I was like, "Oh
Mm.
my gosh, here I was thinking I was hiding it from them." So, in order for me to like authentically be myself, I knew for or authentically be a mother, I had to get a divorce. But for me, my authenticity really grew when I left social. When I
That's
left
true.
Instagram, that
The
is because
validation.
the validation piece, and that's what I was gonna say earlier was like when I left Instagram, that's when I no longer had to worry about the validation, had no longer had to worry about keeping up with the Joneses or
Yeah.
people saying like, well, "What is up to you now? What are you doing?" and all this stuff. So like that was so pivotal for me. And that's what I was gonna ask you. Did you find that coming off of social media helped with you being able to be authentically yourself?
I got to be present in the moment, in every single moment of my life without having to think about, oh, if I post this, is everybody going to like it? Or, how do I look? Or, just things that doesn't even matter. And when you talked about like going through divorce and sitting on the couch, I was actually the opposite. So in my marriage with my kids, we were always doing something. It was like we had a schedule every weekend. We were going out. We were doing this. When I became authentically myself, I took my ass to that couch. I laid down and I sat there for hours. And the
Mm,
kids would come downstairs like, "Oh, what are we doing today?" Absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing.
right.
So, I mean, showing up and being authentic, it takes many shapes, many forms, and it could alter your life for the better, obviously, but just understanding and being aware that my authenticity doesn't look like yours, or
Right. Well,
yours
it
doesn't look
can't.
like the next person's. Yeah, and
It
be
can't
okay
because
with
we are
that.
not. And that's also the thing about I think social media that it makes us all a bunch of copycats because
Right.
everybody's like, and I remember there's one point there was like, oh, it's the girl uniform. It was like a white or a black top with wide leg pants and white sneakers. Everybody had it on. It was because we are being influenced essentially, right? Or you saw, I
It's
always
like
call
you're back in high school.
or the Kardashian effect. We were talking about that the other day. I was like, after the
Yeah,
Kardashians, everybody wanted a BBL after that. And you're like,
right.
if you go back and you think about Melissa Ford back in the day, she was the body, it was a regular black woman's body.
Yes.
And then now you see these BBLs that women are killing themselves to get because they think that they have to be like somebody else. And so
Mm-mm.
I also think that's part of like the social media or the influence of social media is that like people are showing up like other people because they're not finding who they are, their own identity because they're just being influenced by others. So
No.
it takes me to this week's quote, which I think talking about authenticity, and it's just simply like authenticity means erasing the gap between what you firmly believe inside and what you reveal to the outside world. Right? So it's this
Mm.
idea of marrying these two, like, you have your own values, you have your own morals, but do you show that to the outside world or do you show what you think the outside world wants you to be? And so it's figuring out how to marry those two ideas of like, I'm authentically going to live my life. These are my values, these are my morals, these are my principles in which I want to live by. And I want to show the outside world how to do that. And the only way I can do that is showing up authentically as myself. There is no other
Yeah.
Akila, there is no other Zakia in the world. There is no other you in the world. You are uniquely your own. And so when you show up authentically as yourself, that's why I was saying in my journal entry, the manifestations, the miracles come because you're authentically walking in your purpose of who you are meant to be.
Yeah. And I love this quote because I think it allows you to decide. You get to decide what everybody else sees on the outside world. And that's okay. It doesn't mean you have to code switch or be different, but you get to decide what they see and you want to put your best foot forward, and sometimes you want to just cry and have a breakdown. That's okay too, but I get to choose what you see. And that's it. And I don't need validation from it. I don't need you to co-sign it. I don't I just and sometimes I just need you to listen as a friend, if I'm coming to you with something that is, oh, I'm depressed or anything like that. I love the fact that you get to decide who you want to authentically be, and you get to change too. You ain't got to be the same person.
Do you remember that quote? It was like, so someone said it once on TikTok, and then you know how people can repeat or say the sound. And she was like, say the weird thing. People are desperately seeking realness. And that's what I
Yes,
think it is, that we have become such copycats that anything there or anyone that shows up authentically as themselves, naturally people are attracted to it because we don't see it anymore.
that's it.
We've been so influenced to what to buy, what to eat, what to wear. Y'all wear the outfit you want to wear, even if you think it might be a little weird. People might like, say the thing, go back and study what it is that you want to do. Do what it is that you feel in your heart you are meant to do. Because honestly, I think everything else will then be attracted to you because you were living in your authenticity.
Yes, I love it.
So we hope you've enjoyed this episode. We will see you next week, which is, believe it or not, our final episode of season 2. I
Wow.
know. All right, guys, be authentic, be you. Don't worry about what anyone else thinks, because I promise you, when you're authentic, everything that you want is attracted to you.
That's it.
Peace, y'all. Until next time, get in here, get in here, get in here.